Hello learners, welcome back to the course on learning and development in organization. We move to the next lecture of this particular module 11. We were discussing about the evaluation models. We tried to understand some of the basic evaluation models like the Kirkpatrick, Phillips ROI, etc. Now we move further. Some of the more contemporary models, some of the typical models that are being employed in today's world. We'll look into that as well in today's discussion. I'm Dr. Cyril. Issac. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Business, Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati. Now, when you look into the evaluation of learning and development, please understand that many a time some of the core fundamental aspects have to be considered. And today's session will be an eye-opener to all those initiatives that typically look into what are the core aspects we have to be aware of, we have to consider when we are looking into learning and development. Let's understand this. Let's start from the basic thought that the only thing that is standing between you and your goal is the story that you keep telling yourself as to why you can't achieve it. So this is what you are being pulled back, or this is the whole intention why, or the whole reason why you are not able to achieve something many a time. So when it comes to learning and development initiative, this happens to be one of the critical parameters to go ahead with the evaluation. So let's start with the evaluation of the coaching. Let's understand what are the core drivers for evaluation. The moment we talk about the fact that how we know if coaching is really working, now this might seem like a simple question, but in practice many a time it often goes unanswered. You have hired a coach, and whether it is the coaching program is happening well, we do not many a time have an objective answer to that. So most organizations, they rely on anecdotal success stories or bring satisfaction surveys, and yet continue to invest heavily in coaching programs. So as coaching continues to grow, so does the urgency to demonstrate its value with structured and measurable evaluation methods altogether. So what we understand with respect to the core drivers for evaluation are, there will be always a rising investment in the coaching program. So if you look into the case of coaching itself in the last decade, coaching, especially the executive and leadership coaching, has become a mainstream L&D tool. So organizations are investing significantly in one-on-one or group coaching. The question here is, are we getting value for that investment? This is the basic question we try to answer. So without evaluation, there is no clear way to justify the cost and no structured feedback loop to actually improve how coaching is deployed. The second possible core driver for evaluation is the accountability factor. Accountability and pressure for measurable impact. So in today's performance-driven culture, HR and the learning and development functions, they are under increasing pressure to show clear, data-backed results for any learning intervention, coaching included. So coaching is often seen as a premium solution. It's personalized, strategic and high touch. But with that comes an expectation for accountability. Please do understand, and this is what makes coaching one of the core drivers for evaluation. So organizations need to move beyond we believe coaching works to here is the evidence that coaching leads to specific improvements. The third significant aspect is over-reliance on anecdotal or level 1 reaction level evaluations. So when you look into most coaching evaluations today, they occur at level 1 of the well-known Kirkpatrick model. So this level focuses purely on the coachee's reaction. So let's say, what would the coachee say? The coaching was helpful, or let's say the coachee says that the coach was great. While this feedback is typically important and useful for engagement and perception, it doesn't answer deeper questions such as, did coaching improve the leadership capability? Did it influence the retention? So the answers to those questions are not at all given. So if coaching evaluations stop here, they fail to capture any real value or outcome. Now let's start with some of the contemporary models and some of the effective models that are used these days to understand and evaluate the learning and development initiatives in organization. We'll start with the IES coaching evaluation framework. Let's quickly understand this. This IES coaching evaluation framework developed by the Institute for Employment Studies, IES, that's why the name. This framework emerged from an extensive multi-year study across the public and private sector organizations, and it reflects the real world complexity of coaching, where outcomes are often nuanced, they are individualized and shaped by multiple stakeholders. So typically the IES framework offers a balanced and flexible approach to evaluate coaching. It recognizes that coaching is not always tied to, let's say, formal content or hard metrics. Or sometimes outcomes vary from individual transformation to organizational change. Or multiple perspectives must be captured to get an accurate picture. So instead of a rigid formula, the IES model suggests that evaluators should collect evidence at 3 levels from 4 different sources. So let's see this evidence at 3 levels. Let's break down these 3 levels of evidence on the basis of individual outcomes, basis of organizational impact, and typically the program processes specifically. So let's look into the individual outcome part. This refers to the direct results experienced by the coachee, as we have already seen. So this could include, points like increased self-awareness. It could have improved confidence or emotional intelligence. It could be used for stronger communication or leadership skills, or specific career advancement performance shifts. So when you think of how to capture this, you are essentially looking into pre and post coaching self-assessments. This is critical. You are looking into coaching logs or a reflection journal specifically. We had a great deal of discussion on 360-degree feedback already. So these outcomes are usually qualitative, but can sometimes be measured via skill ratings or behavioral scoring. The second important item as an evidence at the 3 levels is organizational impact. So this assesses the broader impact of coaching on organization. For example, it looks into the higher team productivity, it looks into reduction in conflicts or turnover, it looks into increased employee engagement, and it also has a point where you look into enhance the succession planning or leadership readiness. So these are also futuristic, these are also critical. How do we capture this? When you are looking into the entire scheme of things, while harder to isolate, the organizational impacts can be identified through performance metrics, through engagement surveys, and strategic project outcomes tied to the coached leaders. So this level of evaluation helps align coaching with business goals. The third aspect is program process. This evaluates the design, delivery, and management of the coaching program itself. So there are some key questions that are included here that would typically answer or give us some important understanding with respect to the coaching evaluation. So was the coaching program well structured and administered? That's a basic question that will be asked. Were goals clearly defined and tracked? Were participants and coaches adequately matched? And was the coaching delivered consistently? So with respect to these questions, how do you typically capture them? Some of the useful methods include feedback from coaches and coachees on the logistics. This will answer some of the key questions, whether typically the investment was worth it. Or sometimes you make assessment of how objectives were set and recorded. This will also give us some idea that whether the coaching was delivered consistently, what was the program, what was objective, what typically turned out to be the outcome. We also have a review of onboarding and matching process. So this also typically becomes relevant and it answers some of the critical questions that are posted here. So when you look into these aspects, typically evaluating processes ensures that coaching is efficient, it is scalable, and I would say it is replicable. So these are the three parameters. I repeat, it is efficient, it is scalable, and replicable, and this makes it a success. Now when we look into the 4 key sources of evidence, so right now what we tried was looking into the evidence at 3 levels. Now we are looking into the 4 key sources of evidence. We start with the coachees. The most direct source of feedback, I would say, would be this, that their experience would be taken into consideration, their learning process or what they have learned, changes in the mindset if any, performance if any, behavior if any, perceived value of the coaching relationship. So these are the most direct source of feedback, and the methods would be, you can always do it with some impact questionnaires, you can have some structured interviews, you can have reflective journals altogether. So this, though we say about evaluation as one of the key sources of evidence within the IES coaching evaluation framework, there is one significant problem, and that is there is only and only one viewpoint. You talk about coachee, you have only one dimension which you are addressing. The second approach would be coaches. Whether internal or external, coaches can offer rich qualitative data. They may observe shifts in coachee attitudes. They may talk about engagement that is there with action plans. They will talk about the progress towards goals. So what are the different methods? You can have coach debrief forms, you can have coach impact reports, you can interview or supervise some summaries, or session summaries can be utilized for that. This helps validate or challenge the coachee's self-assessment. So basically we are looking into these 2 aspects. We move further with respect to the third critical aspect or the third key source of evidence, which is document. When you talk about documents, these include administrative records of the coaching process. So this might include, coaching contracts, this might include goal setting forms, this might include session summaries and progress reports. So they serve as objective evidence of what was intended, what was planned, and what was achieved. So documentation can confirm typically whether goals were defined, whether the timelines were met, and whether the action plan was followed. So these are the typical aspects which can be understood with respect to the outcome or the learnings from the documents. So typically these actually get confirmed with the help of documents. And the fourth typical source of evidence would be organizational representatives. This includes, line managers, it will include HR or L&D sponsors, it will include program coordinators. So when you talk about the method, it is all about sponsor interviews, it is all about line manager questionnaire, end of the program feedback, etc. So when you talk about a broader context, this gives us observable behavioral changes, it gives us performance improvements, it gives us team impact, and it aligns with the strategic goals. So these are some of the broader context that it gives us. The methods, as we have stated, goes from sponsor interviews all the way back to the program feedback as such. Now when you talk about the entire process or why to use this IES framework, please understand that it offers several key benefits like flexibility. It can be adapted to suit different coaching contexts. It can have balance. It combines qualitative and quantitative insights. It gives us credibility, involves multiple stakeholders and viewpoints, and it gives us strategic alignment, encourages connection between coaching and organizational goals. So what are the typical aspects When you look into the entire IES coaching, it creates a grid or checklist where each cell represents a different type of insight that could be gathered. Let's say you can have different levels, which comes as evidence that is sought at different levels, and you will also have likely sources of evidence, be it coaches, line managers, coaches, or the documents. So what does coaches say about their individual outcome? That can be a question that can get the answer from here. What does the coach say about the program process? Or what do documents reveal about organizational goals? What does the line manager say about the coach's behavior change? So more of these boxes you can fill with relevant data, the more holistic and credible your coaching evaluation will be. The second important model that today I would like to discuss is typically the logic model. Logic model stems from program evaluation theory and has been widely used since the 1960s in public health, in education, and non-profit sectors. So some of the typical components would include inputs, the resources that are invested. It could be the budget, the time, the coaching expertise, etc. Activities would have the specific actions that are taken, like coaching sessions or tools used, assessments, etc. Outputs could be tangible results like the number of sessions, participant attendance, etc. So typically, we look into the outcomes. It can be short term, it can be intermediate, it can be long term. For short term, you will have the knowledge and skill gains. For intermediate, you will have behavioral change, or you will have increased confidence altogether. For long term, it is more about the career progression and more about improvement in performance or improved performance metrics. The use in coaching is interesting because the logic model provides a structured framework to plan, to implement and evaluate coaching interventions by tracking causal relationships. So it is especially valuable if you ask me for longitudinal coaching programs, maybe in educational space or non-profit organizations or even government sectors for that case. Now the third most important aspect, which we have already touched upon, I'll try to give a more interesting perspective here, is the balanced scorecard approach. And we start with the key dimensions in the BSc approach. It was, as you know, and you are quite familiar with this, at least in the previous modules we have discussed, it was developed by Robert Kaplan and David Norton in the early 90s. So it was initially introduced in their Harvard Business Review article in 1992, I suppose. So when you look into the key dimensions in coaching evaluation, we understand that there are certain dimensions that they gave us. One is learning and growth perspective. You talk about how you measure employee development, how you measure the mindset shifts, how you measure the resilience factor, and how effectively you can monitor the coaching culture. Then there are some internal processes. It evaluates coaching delivery methods, session quality, and program efficiency. It looks into customer or client perspective, assesses satisfaction of coaches, stakeholders, or sponsors altogether. It will also look into the financial perspective, where it looks at cost effectiveness, productivity improvements, or the ROI from coaching specifically. So the use in coaching is that it helps organizations align coaching goals with broader strategic objectives, ideal for executive and performance coaching, where business impact is critical. Now we move on to the fourth model. Again, we have touched upon this in the previous module, which is GROW model, the evaluation focused use model, developed by Sir John Whitmore, a pioneer of performance coaching. So when you talk about GROW, it's all about goal. It's all about reality. It's all about options, and it's all about will. So you have to define the goal or desired outcome, explore the current situation in reality. What is your current situation? When it comes to options, you have to identify the potential strategies or actions. W is a will. What will you do now? So this is what the GROW model is all about. So while GROW is primarily used for guiding coaching conversation, it can be repurposed for evaluation. Like let's say you can look into the goal achievement part. Goal achievement part, was the original coaching goal met? That is a question that you can answer here. Or maybe the reality check. Reality check, how did the baseline change post coaching? Or you can always have a options evaluation. Particularly, where a variety of solutions tried effectively, and will and action. Did the client take sustained action toward improvement? So, particularly useful in individual coaching, like life coaching, executive coaching, or performance coaching. That could be a best use case for this. Or it can help both coaches and coachees reflect on the progress and barriers to growth. Now, as part of the practical orientation and what is happening with respect to industry, and to connect between what we have discussed on a theoretical front and match it with the industry expectations, I would generally take up some case studies. As part of that, today we'll discuss about the case of Chorus. So let's understand the background first. So this case comes from Chorus, one of Europe's leading steel manufacturing companies, now known as the Tata Steel Europe. So at Chorus, coaching was used extensively at the executive level to support leadership transitions, change management and individual development. However, as the coaching footprint grew, the company began to ask a critical question. The question was, are we evaluating these engagements consistently? This was the basic question. And are we using the data to improve the future coaching? So that set the objective clearly. The primary goal for Chorus was to establish a transparent, effective approach to evaluate the coaching or the executive coaching that's going on. So they wanted to ensure that coaching was not just delivered, but reviewed, learned from, and refined as part of continuous improvement loop. So what did they actually do? When you look into the actions that happened with respect to the coaching, they developed a standardized evaluation template. So, a structured set of tools was created for all coaches and coachees. These templates typically guided participants to document the initial coaching objectives, what are the progress that happened against these objectives, post-coaching outcomes, all these parameters were captured. So this brought uniformity across the coaching program, allowing the company to compare coaching outcomes across different departments, levels, and coaches. The second aspect was to evaluate, or the typical evaluations to be conducted post-coaching. So each coaching engagement at Chorus concluded with a structured evaluation phase conducted a few weeks after the final session. So this focused on mainly three key areas. One is, let's say, goal attainment. Coaches assessed whether they met their coaching goals, such as, it could be improving leadership or leadership presence or handling conflict more effectively. Other significant aspects would be behavioral shifts. The behavioral shifts like changes in workplace behavior were reviewed through self-assessment or feedback from peers or managers. Manager insights were looked into, like line managers provided insights on observed changes and how coaching influenced team dynamics, adding an objective perspective to the evaluation. So this approach gave Chorus a well-rounded view of coaching outcomes, balancing personal insight with organizational observations. Now, how the data was used? Chorus didn't just collect data, they used it to improve the entire coaching system altogether, the entire coaching ecosystem. So coach selection was improved, evaluation data was analyzed to identify which coaches were consistently delivering high impact. What styles of approaches or what styles or approaches were most effective in different business contexts. So this helped Chorus refine how they matched the coaches to coachees, ensuring stronger alignment based on personality, based on the objectives and the leadership level. So this became critical factor, matching the coaches to the coachees, and it had a significant output. Second was to bring in a program improvement. Insights from the evaluation process were used to adjust the coaching structure altogether, update onboarding processes, improve the goal setting frameworks at the start of the coaching. So they proved that evaluation can be practical, it can be purposeful, and it can be impactful typically. So without compromising the integrity of the coaching relationship. I repeat, they typically proved that evaluations can be practical, it can be purposeful and impactful without compromising the integrity of coaching relationships. So when you are talking about this coach selection, program improvement, etc. in Chorus, what you understand is a practical version of what we have been discussing till this point. So when you are looking into coaching, there are different flavors of that are associated with the evaluation pattern. Now, what we understand with this case study is that there is tremendous possibility and potential for improvement, and we can have a direct understanding of the coach, the coachee, and their interactions, and how effectively this learning and development initiatives that are happening as part of coaching can be improved. Thank you for listening to me patiently. We'll come up with more details of learning and development in the next class. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.